In 1911, a boy named Aimé Dietrich sits in a chair he has sat in before. He is 9 years old. His eyes are half closed, but he is not asleep. His mother watches from the corner of the room, the way you watch something you've stopped believing will work, but haven't stopped hoping for. The boy has been going blind, slowly over months. No doctor in the city of Hopkinsville has been able to say why. There is no infection they can find, no injury, no name for what is happening to him. A stranger's voice comes out of the boy, not his own, not quite. It describes something none of the doctors had considered: a spinal condition, an old injury, nerve pressure translating into blindness in a way that had no place in the medical textbooks of 1911. The doctors try it anyway, because they have nothing else. The boy's sight comes back. Nobody in that room can tell you why it worked. That's not where this story starts pretending to have answers. That's exactly where it gets interesting. His name was Edgar Cayce, and if you strip away 60 years of spiritual mythology, what's left is stranger and more uncomfortable than the legend. He wasn't a mystic by profession. He was, by his own account, an ordinary photographer from Kentucky who discovered, almost by accident, that if he lay down and let his conscious mind go quiet, something in him could describe illness in people he'd never examined, sometimes people he'd never met, in cities he'd never visited. He didn't like it particularly. He read the Bible daily and worried more than once that what came through him in trance wasn't compatible with what he believed while awake. There were years he refused to give readings at all, afraid of what they might mean about his own soul. He gave over 14,000 of these readings across his lifetime, and by the accounts of people who knew him, he remained mostly bewildered by his own gift until the day he died. He never charged what you'd call a fortune for it, never built a stage persona around it. People who worked alongside him described someone almost aggressively ordinary, outside of the trance state. A man who fished, who worried about money, who forgot things the way anyone forgets things. And it's worth saying plainly, most of what came through in those readings can't be verified at all. Vague statements, guesses that simply missed. A fair accounting of Cayce has to hold all of that too. This isn't the story of a man who claims certainty. It's the story of a man who, often enough to be strange, kept describing things his century didn't yet have language for. And then, decades later, medicine built that language without him. That's the part worth sitting with, not whether he was a prophet. Whether intuition can sometimes outrun explanation. Take the case of a woman referred to in the records only by initials. Suffering from a digestive condition, doctors of the 1930s had no consistent framework for. Cayce's reading pointed again and again to an old emotional shock, a fright, a grief as the root of a purely physical symptom. The body was the body. The mind was the mind. They didn't share a filing cabinet. 70 years later, that filing cabinet doesn't exist anymore. The field is called psychosomatic medicine now, the way chronic stress rewires the gut through the vagus nerve, the way early emotional trauma shows up decades later as autoimmune and digestive disorders. Take his repeated insistence that the adrenal glands and emotional state were far more entangled than medicine of his time assumed. Cortisol wasn't isolated until 1935. Cayce had been describing its behavioral fingerprints for 20 years by then, without ever having the word for it. Or take the readings on what he called assimilation and elimination, his oddly specific framework connecting digestive health to conditions as varied as arthritis and skin disorders, decades before the science of the gut microbiome existed in any recognizable form. There's a fourth case worth mentioning: his readings on epilepsy in children, where he repeatedly linked seizure activity to spinal misalignment and circulatory restriction near the base of the skull, decades before anyone studied the relationship between cranial blood flow and neurological symptoms. Modern research into cerebrospinal fluid dynamics and certain rare seizure disorders has since given some of that guesswork an uncomfortable amount of retrospective credibility. None of this proves what he claimed about how the information reached him. But these aren't vague spiritual generalities. They're specific, falsifiable claims that had no supporting science in 1930 and do now. Here's where most videos about Cayce go one of two ways. They either declare him a certified prophet, medical science be damned, or they dismiss the whole thing as coincidence and move on. Both of those are easier than what actually happened. What actually happened is stranger. An uneducated man in a trance state kept describing mechanisms, trauma stored in tissue, hormones shaped by emotion, the gut entangled with the mind, that had no scientific vocabulary yet. Maybe that's a kind of intuition we don't have good language for either. Doctors have always had colleagues with uncanny diagnostic instincts nobody can quite explain. Cayce's trance state may simply have been an extreme, unfiltered version of something the best clinicians already do quietly. That's a less exciting story than psychic healer. It's also more honest, and it doesn't require you to believe anything you can't hold up to scrutiny. What Cayce actually leaves us with isn't proof of the supernatural. It's a harder question. How much of what the body knows arrives before the mind has a word for it? You felt this yourself, probably. A decision that felt right for reasons you couldn't articulate until much later. A sense that something was wrong in your body before any test confirmed it. Cayce, whatever he was, spent a lifetime speaking from that place before science had built the roads to it. He was wrong plenty of times. That's not the profile of a fraud selling certainty. It's the profile of someone standing at the edge of something real and not quite knowing how to describe it. Whether you call what he did prophecy, pattern recognition, or something we simply don't have a name for yet, the sickness he named 100 years ago has a diagnosis now. The name arrived late, but it arrived. Maybe the more honest question isn't whether Edgar Cayce could see the future of medicine. It's whether any of us fully know how much we already sense, long before we have the words for it.